So at the last minute, I decided to do the bracket challenge. And if you're interested, I created a league called HockeyCast. You can go there and you can find the league and then create your own bracket inside that league. And that way we can compare throughout the playoffs. So I'm just creating my bracket inside of the league that I created. And I'm just going to save the bracket name. And let's start out west, Colorado and Seattle. Now, I'm not going to be too long here because I know there's a lot of other bracket videos and they're just long and drained out. And I just want to know what their selections are with maybe a little bit of detail here and there. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick Colorado to win this series just for the lack of experience of Seattle being only their second year in the league. Then we have Dallas and Minnesota. I think it's going to be a tough series, but Dallas should prevail in that one. Then we got Vegas and Winnipeg. Normally I would pick Vegas, seeing as how Winnipeg was playing through the latter half of the season and just barely made it into the playoffs. Vegas, when it comes down to a series, I don't know if they got the goaltending to be able to pull that off. And I know that Winnipeg does. So I'm going to pick Winnipeg. And of course, Edmonton and LA. So I'm going to pick Edmonton. They're just a better team. The Colorado-Seattle series, I'm going to say 5 games. The Winnipeg and Vegas series, I'm going to say 6 games. Dallas and Minnesota, 7. Oilers and LA, I'm going to pick 7 games as well. Submit that. And let's go over to the East. So on the East, we have Boston and Florida. So everybody, it's pretty obvious who's going to win there. Boston, and I'm selecting Boston as well. But I'm not expecting Boston to get out of the first round easily, whether it be through, a longer series or through injuries. Florida, everybody's writing them off, and every year there's always an underdog story. So I think that Florida is going to give Boston a hard time. Now, there's a lot of pressure on Boston, being that they just set pretty near every record this year as a team. So that first series is going to be a lot of pressure on Boston to get it together. I think they will make it, and it'll be a pretty quick series, but I think there's going to be some injuries. Toronto, Tampa. This is going to be the year that Toronto makes it past the first round. Tampa, yeah, they're Tampa, and they could very likely win this series or at least extend it. But Toronto is just too deep this year. Remember last year, they almost beat Tampa, and they had subpar goaltending for that entire series. Jack Campbell had an 897 or an 876, something like that, save percentage to Vasilevsky's 922. So, and the Leafs almost beat them. They were 2 saves away from beating Tampa last year. This year, Tampa couldn't really add much because of the salary cap, and then they lost that player due to injury. So I don't know if they're going to be good to go for the first game or not. But this series, I have Toronto. Then we have Carolina and New York Islanders. I think Carolina will win that one. And New Jersey and New York. Again, New Jersey's a young team, so I got to give the edge to New York. So how many games will these series go? Boston and Florida, I think, will go 5 games. Carolina and New York Islanders, I think it's going to go 6 games. It's going to be a battle. The Leafs and Tampa, I think it's going to go 6. And New York Islanders versus New York Rangers, I'm going to say 7. And submit that. There we go. So let's go back up to the top. Okay, so now we have Colorado and Dallas. I'm going to pick Colorado. And then we have Edmonton and Winnipeg. Of course, I'm going to pick Edmonton. On the east side, we have Boston and Toronto. Now, here's where I get a little biased sometimes because there's two different options here. Well, obviously, Boston, everyone's picking Boston to go to the Stanley Cup and winning it. But there isn't really an underdog story at this point. And wouldn't it be amazing if the Leafs could slay those Dragons by first winning the first series in like 14 or 15 years by beating Tampa, and then coming up against Boston, which they have lost to twice in the playoffs in the past where they've been eliminated, when they had a hand at winning that series. They had a chance to win both those series, but the Leafs they choked. The moment got bigger than them, and they folded, especially that epic comeback in 2012, I think. So this year, though, we have a different story. If Boston comes into the second round with a few injuries, I think they're going to have a more difficult time with the Leafs. And don't forget, the Leafs have a leadership core now through Ryan O'Reilly. Yes, John Tavares, he is the captain, but I think Ryan O'Reilly has a lot more experience in the playoffs, and I think he's going to make a huge difference for their mental game. Remember, Ryan O'Reilly was with the St. Louis Blues when they won it all in 2019. He ended up being the MVP, the Conn Smythe winner. So I think that's going to be a huge difference maker that nobody really is banking on, nobody's really paying attention to. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, despite all the comments I'm going to get, and I'm going to say Toronto is going to take out Boston. And that's it's more or less a long shot here, but we have to have some excitement because everything just looks and seems too predictable. But this is the playoffs, so nothing should be this predictable. So that's why I think there's going to be a huge upset at that point. And then we have Carolina and New York. That's going to be a tough one, but I think it's going to be New York. So, Toronto and New York, Colorado and Edmonton. Well, I think Edmonton is going to get by Colorado. And New York and Toronto. Well, if Toronto could get past Tampa and Boston, I don't think they're going to be as healthy in the third round. It's hard to say what this series could go, but I hate doing it. I really like that storyline of Toronto going all the way, but I think it's going to be New York Rangers. And then it's going to be Oilers versus New York, and I think Edmonton is going to take it. The total goals. Enter the total goals scored in the Stanley Cup Final series. So over 7 games, because I think the Oilers and New York, I think it's going to go 7 games. And, man, with McDavid on the Oilers, I think, and Zibanejad on New York Rangers. Did I say McDavid on New York Rangers? I meant McDavid on Edmonton, right? Obviously. I think that the total goals, I'm going to say, in this series, I'm going to say 45. So that is my bracket. There's the complete bracket. I think Toronto will get to the third round and be defeated by New York. So there we have it. There is my selections for the 2023 playoffs.